This will be a huge recall for when I come back in the future to be able to find some of the answers that were true, were not true, some of the things that I will do and bring back to you. This is awareness documentation. Brah. Why, hello there! Today is November 2nd, 2019, and today's awareness documentation, 3:20 p.m., is going to be a little special. The reason why is because I'm going to try and do something a little bit different, a little bit unique, and I'm going to try and do this book writing again through speech. Literally taking my speech, then taking that into a book. Into writing a book. So if I can be able to do this, then I feel like using the outline that I created with all these different topics that I'm going to be connecting the dots for is going to help you better understand, where I'm coming from. So to give you an idea, here's the overview, my problem, my pain, my hope, and then my solution, which is where I'm currently at right now. And by going through all of this, these are basically like topics and subtopics that I'm going to talk about and connect the dots for. This entire video could be an hour long. It could be, the 92% that this camera battery actually has. It could be 90 minutes. It could be until I finish this. So there's 3 different variations to how much work I'm going to do to be able to get this chapter finished for the whole section or part of the book on my personal life story over the past 2.5 years, coming up to 3. And I feel like by being able to share this with you, it'll really create a nice amount of closure that you can go and watch the video if you want to be able to sum it up. You can go watch my movie if you want. You can go and check all the previous videos during the time periods that I happen to mention. It's just me being real, guys. Like, I'm documenting my life. And by sharing this story, I also get to write my book too and create an awesome piece of content for you. So I just think documenting over creating makes so much more sense. So that's really why I'm doing it. In part, this is probably only going to get hard when I have to break, because my arms are going to feel like they're going to fall off. My left arm already feels like that, just given my bodily condition. It's so hard to posture it appropriately, So I'm going to start here, and the first thing I'm going to be talking about is me being, look at this guy taking his selfie. I'm walking around the video camera. A victim of narcissistic abuse. So allow me to set the stage. My book is called Touch the Spirit, Kill the Crime, Surviving Mental and Emotional Homelessness. To bring that all into the picture, the reason for this is because if you actually don't have a place that you're dwelling right here in your brain that is safe, it's warm, it's welcoming, and you don't have this habitat where you can be able to reside in that is going to provide the mental safety, the emotional stability that you need to be able to grow and mature, instead you're being violated. It's like not having a home, because a house is different from a home. And where there's this constant volatility or this viciousness that can be quite shocking in your average daily life, where so many people may or may not be going through that. It's putting you into a place where you create this instability that puts you in a cycle and routine of bad and toxic behaviors that will come to affect you for the rest of your life if you don't figure out how to reverse that cycle and that process by stopping the tape, flipping the script, and then changing the recording that you now have. So basically, that's what this book is about opening up to the cycle that is going to actually be useful toward you developing your whole and abundant productivity by realizing that what it is you're doing may actually be hurting you, and it may not be toward your betterment, and then actually doing something about it by giving you the direction that is now going to be positive toward your intake and your expression and what you're giving and receiving and being in service of for
and as the highest, truest expression of yourself. By acknowledging these things, it'll connect the dots between mental health, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence. These three things that are going to be the most critical and important toward your life in developing emotional literacy, so that when you have this emotional literacy, you will not be stopped by some of life's most challenging circumstances. You won't have to hold yourself stuck in a vicious cycle of not knowing what to do for 2 weeks, and you can just accept what's happening, know what to do, and move forward. Like, it's that simple. So emotional literacy is going to be key for your decision making. It's going to be key for you having a clear mind, for you not stumbling and knocking over the towers that you're building because you just don't have the right building blocks set up. And when you have the right setup, you're going to be key. Like, nothing can stop you. It's incredible. Interestingly enough, I'm in a different place, and it has nothing to do with my emotional state, or my mental state, and I'm completely safe being homeless, So, I'm so safe that, I'm in a period where I can write my book while I'm homeless. Like, I'm not getting mentally ill. You know what I mean? Like, it's incredible. I don't know if anybody else would consider doing something like that, but I am. So basically, by being able to write this using video form, video to audio, I feel like it'll help you a lot in being able to understand my story, my state, and how I progressed by taking the strategies I take. In so doing, I'll also explain the mentality, the cycles that actually help me move forward, the mind story, so to speak, that I had to tell myself to be able to move through one challenge into the next. Right? And I feel like these are going to be some of the most pivotal things that I've had to deal with over the past few years. Kind of heartbreaking in many ways, and just being real. That's all. So, it smells like terrible cat shit right here. Excuse me. Oh, that ain't no puppies. All right. So, my life starts out at the age of 19. Actually, at the end of age 18, becoming a 19-year-old, I literally thought that I was going to die. There was a kid that once told me that you're going to die at 19, and I believed that, and that position became a disposition that owned my life and my story, and everything I was doing was focused on, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. And I just inhabited that in my daily ritual, in my practice of what I was telling myself. So throughout the whole age of 19, just making the transition from 18 to 19, I literally believed that everything was coming against me. I was being lied to, I was being deceived. I didn't know what to do. My whole world was just so corrupt and dark and evil, and my thoughts were just as equal to it. So I was being sucked into this gaping hole of pain and suffering, and I didn't know that I was actually being abused. And it was this lack of knowing that pulled me deeper into this abyss and took my personality, my character, my identity, my voice away from me, stole it from me, and started to harvest the deepest and most mental, emotional, physical, spiritual fruits that I had to harvest and give back to the world. It was taking and stealing those from me without me knowing the actual riches, the content that I had imbued inside of me. So, because I didn't know this, I was going through this constant cycle and state of not comprehending what was actually wrong with me. And in so doing, what was actually happening was I was actually being a victim of narcissistic abuse, which is literally when I become a codependent in a relationship, somebody who is dependent on somebody else for all of their needs, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically. These things that would give me fulfillment were actually being displaced by the voice of somebody else who was telling me what it was that I needed. And in so doing, I was literally, as a codependent, in the relationship with my mother and even my brother, in this triangle dynamic of my mother was the abuser, and she was a screamer, and she would scream at me, and verbally, psychologically, mentally, emotionally mess with my mind and tell me all these evil, dark things, like I'm worthless and you can't do this and da 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 da, and having me ordered around to do things for her. My brother was the person who came in between and would have those things stop if I asked any questions, like, what's wrong with you? Why are you treating me this way? Like, it would be irrational for me to say something that actually made sense. This is not okay. She would scream and call in my brother and say, like, get him away from me, make him stop, like, blah, 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 blah. And it was the exact opposite of the mentality, like, is what I'm doing not okay? Telling her to stop screaming at me and treating me meanly? Like, why are things being reframed and twisted? Why is my perception getting gaslighted in a way that the actual meaning of what is happening isn't actually the same as what I believe it to be? What actually happened was actually there, to benefit me. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe what I'm thinking is not in alignment with what is actually happening. And then you start questioning yourself, you start questioning your own judgment, your own beliefs, and eventually, through all this poking in your behavior, the illusion that is taking place starts to become your reality, because your bubble around your mind has shrunk and your brain is right here, but because it's still being poked, it's actually getting manipulated and your belief system changes. And then you become a victim of narcissistic abuse, where you actually become a slave, mentally, emotionally, physically, to the other person who has displaced your reality with an elusive state, taking away your authenticity, your freedom of expression, and exposing you to the grave insecurities and weaknesses and states that you can be penetrated at any moment. You no longer have skin around your body. You're completely vulnerable at any given moment, and you can be controlled and manipulated as a result of that. So because I had no skin, I had no protective barrier, no protective coating, and I was becoming sensitive to everything that I was actually eating or doing. Like, things and stress were just so terrible for me. I mean, even at the point where I was in college, I was studying, and studying really wasn't working for me. Like, I would stay up all night and procrastinate on these assignments, and I wouldn't get anything done. I would stay up all night until like 5 a.m. in the morning and start working on the assignments, all while drinking massive cups of coffee and overdosing on this caffeine, getting to the point where I would come into my music class in the morning, and when I would breathe in the air, I was struggling. Like, it was hard to breathe, and you're breathing like really short breaths, and it's really, really scary. Your heart is beating intensely, and you're just like, oh my God, like, what am I gonna do? It is scary. Like, you're gonna die type of scary. I knew I had to cut it out. Everything I was doing, it was not working for me, obviously. School and what I was having, and the way I was treating myself and my relationships, I was becoming a fake person who betrayed myself, and everything that I believed that I was doing, it wasn't relevant to who I actually thought I was. And I was so confused, so insecure, so split, and I didn't know what was going on. I started to, not only sabotage myself, but I started to hurt others in that way, and I began to treat others without this sort of compassion or this love that I so wanted in my relationships. But I didn't understand that the love that I was getting was so limited, and I had to give something in order to get something. But not only did I have to give something to get something, I had to lose something to gain it. So my exchanges were compromises. I had to give like an arm and a leg to be able to get, a kiss, or not that it wasn't actually a kiss, but just the exchange of what I thought was love was conditional love, and it wasn't really for me. So I was getting so sick that I just didn't want my whole world to be swallowed whole. And by being swallowed whole, my entire mentality, everything I was doing and consuming was so negative that I didn't want to become swallowed by it. I knew that there was something else out there for me. So all I had to do was find it. And I just had to look outside of this world that I was shaping for myself and start to figure out what was actually useful for me, what was actually outside of this reality that I had crafted for myself. So what I literally did was I took a camera, just like this, actually this GoPro camera that I'm filming on right now. I picked it up and I started filming myself in my room and speaking into it, just as I am now, so that I could be able to learn what was going on in my brain. And by doing that, I was talking to myself, speaking into my self-awareness so that I could figure out who I was, why I was here, and what I was actually here to do. And then I would take that video, play it back, so that I could understand and interpret, the actual body language that I was sharing, the tonality in my voice that I was expressing, and the actual words that I was saying. I would very much notice that they were the exact opposite of what I truly wanted for me and what I meant to do. So I had to catch that and grasp it and turn it into my reality. Little did I know that this would actually become a process called awareness documentation, that is a visualization, meditation, hypnosis, and talk therapy process that I'm going to be giving to you so that you can take that and apply it to your life and learn everything about who you actually are, so you can go out and live your life and follow and walk in your calling and know all the things you need to know because you found self-awareness for yourself. So I want to share that with you. But before we do, I'm going to explain my life so that you can relate to me and move on with your life. And it's all a connection process, right? So we're going to continue with this. We'll have to do it in the next part of the video. Now, I'm doing a really quick run through for, my lifestyle of narcissistic abuse, because believe it or not, going through a dark place that you're no longer in is really hard to do when you've cleared your mental space and you're healthy, So I'm not really talking too much about that because I wrote a ton about that. It's just a manner of explaining what narcissistic abuse actually is from a heightened perspective that I'm still doing, and then explaining the continuation of it. So I'm going to be explaining the continuation of my story from here and what I did to evolve my consciousness moving forward. Okay? So basically, from this place, I began doing awareness documentations, and these really helped me because what I was doing was taking knowledge and turning it into experience through a process of application, in which case I would take the awareness documentation and use that as a self-reflection process that would help me learn at an advanced rate. So everything that I was researching that was relevant, because information that is relevant is what actually is knowledge. I was taking that knowledge, turning it into experience through application, and then self-reflecting in a process that would help me turn that knowledge and experience into wisdom, right? So by doing this, everything that I was doing, I was learning deeply from, and I was not continuing to fail in my experiences moving forward by doing the same thing again, because I understood much more so the cycle that I was living and what I did not want to repeat. Instead, I understood the clarity in doing the exact opposite of everything that I believed, because everything that I was doing up to that point was so sickening that it couldn't have been something that was healthy for me. So I chose to do the opposite. It was the most logically, illogically, rational, irrational, healthy way of thinking for me, was to do the exact opposite of everything that I was doing. Isn't that cool? And everything I was doing there moving forward began to be what was actually healthy for me. So it healed me in its place, right? So what I found in my research was that I had a massive candida infection in my body, or a candida overgrowth is what they call it, candidiasis. When candida, a normally healthy bacteria in your body, becomes an overgrowth and you have too much of it, it's in abundance, it becomes very unhealthy for you, because what it actually does is it stores itself in your gut down here. And if your gut is being infested by this candida, it's basically like yeast roots that grow really strong and dig into the intestinal walls of your gut, so that you cannot absorb the nutrients from the foods that you're actually eating, in which case it causes your body to be backed up. It causes you not to yield the health that you would otherwise be getting from these resources that you're consuming. And your whole body starts to degenerate and corrupt and deplete itself of what is necessary to heal. Because your gut is not healed, it affects all of your other organs. So what was happening was that my stomach, my gut, had leaky gut syndrome and candidiasis, or a candida overgrowth, and this stuff was clogging up my receptors, and that was effectively what I was seeing in my shit from time to time. So naturally, what I came to find out was that this stuff was making me very unhealthy, and it was caused by stress that I couldn't really do anything about. I didn't entirely focus and control in understanding where I was in my role, what was causing this stress, but what I knew was that school was ridiculously hard for me, and it didn't seem like it was something that I could continue doing. I mean, the sign of procrastination is that you're doing it because you don't actually want to do it. It doesn't fulfill you, it doesn't make you feel whole, so therefore you avoid trying to do it and you put it off to the last minute and give your last ditch effort of an attempt at completing what is considered a requirement, when it's still necessary but not entirely toward your belief system. You procrastinate. So that's what I was doing. So when I researched this and I found out that I had a massive candida overgrowth, what I ended up doing was starting to visit doctors. And I was really excited about this because I believed that doctors had all of the answers, and they would give me the answers to everything that I was struggling with. And by being able to speak with them and hearing their expressed opinion about what it was that I was going through, I would start to find solutions and be able to actually do something about what was going on in my body. But little did I know that with their own interests, I was visiting doctor after doctor, being handed pill after pill, getting test after test, and then more pills and more referrals, that I was going in a complete circle. And I didn't understand how damaging this was to me and my self-esteem and my connection with doctors, because I was actually effectively searching outside of me for a solution. And because I was searching outside of me for a solution, I didn't come to believe at an early state in my life that the solution was actually inside of me. And I was actually filming this process and talking to myself about it, but I hadn't realized the conclusion of everything that I believed was causing me to filter my relationship with myself in a way that it was negative, not self-healing, but degeneratively positive, with negativity being the absolute. So I had to figure out how to be able to heal myself by searching outside of myself for the answers with these doctors. But very soon enough, through my research, I began to discover that the perioral dermatitis that I had, the giant red beard that was actually around my mouth, was a systemic infection that showed the somatic projection, meaning bodily projection of my body's awareness that something was wrong with my lips, and that the way that I was expressing myself was conducive toward the efforts that I actually didn't have my own freedom of expression. So when I began to realize this as a suggestion that my body was telling me that you cannot speak for your own, you do not have your own voice, you do not have an identity, you are not in control, then I began to see, oh shoot, perioral dermatitis, my gut is having problems. Connect these dots, all of this stress is coming from somewhere. Why do I feel like I'm not having a freedom of expression with myself? So as I began to dig deeper into that, I figured out that my expression with myself was being suppressed, and I was actually being abused mentally, emotionally, psychologically, verbally with the parents that were raising me. My mother in particular was the abuser, and I was an adult child of narcissistic abuse. I found this in an article during the time that I was actually researching for a speech topic, and I'm like, I've got to use and talk about this. And as I dug deeper into this topic, I began to discover connections in relation to my illness and my mental health by researching Richard Grannon and Sam Vaknin, the absolute best people in the field talking about narcissistic abuse and, personality disorders and all of these things that were connected to my mental health state. And by digging so much deeper, I realized that, yes, I was a black sheep in the family. And this triangle, this totally toxic dynamic of abuse was suppressing me in every way. And I was becoming somebody who would basically become a shell of an identity. And I wasn't being my authentic self. In fact, I was being displaced to become nobody at the effort and will of the people whom I saw as the highest authority, that I saw as a god to me. And that was my mother, and my brother would intercede and stop our relationship from ever being positive, which it never would be, because my mother was a narcissist and my brother was just as ill. So my entire world around me, learning that they weren't there to actually protect me and look out for me and take care of me. What they were doing was they were feeding me reasons to excuse me, reasons to put me at bay. They were giving me food just to keep me satisfied enough to want to receive more pain from them. More digging away at the surface of who I actually was. So much so that I realized that my entire life was a lie. Everything that I knew and believed to be true was actually a fallacy. It was a falsehood. And I was living a false life. I was living in an illusion that I was creating for myself because of somebody else. And the moment I realized that my environment was shaping me to be who I was, everything shattered around me. And this illusion that I was living, I was now awake to. So I had to accept this reality that I was exposed to and start to change my mental behavior, my way of thinking, the people I talk to, everything in my relationships, my peace of mind, and, who I was speaking to with my own mental health, so that I could become my own authentic version of myself. So through this realization, I ended up taking all of the knowledge of the narcissistic abuse that I was going through, and I realized that it was possible for me to actually break free and continue to break myself loose by taking one step after the next and just learning more and displacing my negative mindset with positivity, so that I could realize that this is like a slingshot effect, and the more pain I had to go through, the more and faster I could be able to launch myself into a better position. Because people who go through this abuse, they have hope for a new life and a new renewal through the pain that they've gone through. They can see things that other people haven't experienced. So I actually went and I had an interest in volunteering at a senior center. And by volunteering at this senior center, I was going to learn what it is that these people were going through and how they felt in their current frame of mind. And I was going to help them feel just a little bit better if I could. And what I learned is that most of these people had a story that they would tell, and they would tell it to me. And if they had some sort of memory problem, like a lot of them had Alzheimer's, right? And they just didn't connect in a way that you could genuinely connect with somebody else again and again. They would connect with me in the moment and tell me their story, but I'd come back maybe the next day and they wouldn't remember me and they'd tell me the same story. And it was really, really eye-opening to me that I'm living a life where I can actually do something to improve my mentality about everything that I'm seeing. And I can continue to grow and evolve and adapt. Regardless of the circumstances, I have my mind. And I have the freedom of choice to be able to change my situation simply by changing the ways that I would think. This was a huge revelation for me at the time. And by being able to participate there and share what gifts I had in the very moment, what I actually was able to decide through being able to speak with Kim Devine, the lady who was basically the lead management or owner of the place, was that she was telling me, in connection to everything I was saying, well, you know, maybe it's your self-fulfilling prophecy to be a motivational speaker. And I was the one who actually said that, but she said maybe it's, and I reflected it. Well, maybe it's my self-fulfilling prophecy to be a motivational speaker. And I had to come into, through this conversation of her learning more about me, I had to own this reality that I wanted to be a motivational speaker, and I wanted to become this person. As a man of integrity, it was my absolute responsibility to become a motivational speaker. In so doing, what I didn't realize and understand at the time was that by being a motivational speaker, what I was actually doing was motivating myself. And by motivating myself through doing these awareness documentations and every conversation I was having mentally in my daily activities, I was changing the way that I was thinking simply by speaking to myself, changing my mentality so that I could become a better person. And this was so huge for me, because I had been telling myself that I was worthless. I had been telling myself that I was a piece of shit, you know, like I didn't think clearly. I couldn't talk to people. I had no way of being able to understand them. I felt so disconnected, and it was so real that it became my reality. So as I began to tell myself, I can have a relationship with these people, I can hold a conversation, you know, I can be able to make people feel better, I began to do that. And I began to feel better about myself, and that was the most important part, is that I had to go through a self-healing process. So where this all really tied in was when it came time for me to be able to deliver this speech in speech class. I went up to the top of the room and stood on the stage, and I delivered my speech, sharing that I was an adult child of narcissistic abuse. And I shared a bit about the relationship dynamic and what it's like, and I admitted that I was the way I was because of the way I thought. And everybody in the room was shocked. They were blown away by everything that I was saying, admitting these things in complete vulnerability on a topic that nobody else would have ever thought of choosing. I had the freedom to choose my own topic, and this is the topic that I chose. And people around me after this speech were comparing themselves to me, saying, I can never do anything like that. It was a momentary lapse of reason for me to say, I'm going to be this motivational speaker. I'm going to do everything in my power to be able to be the best person that I can possibly be. And that moment on stage was one of the deciding moments for me that I can motivate an audience. I can motivate myself. Ultimately, it starts with myself. Ultimately, it begins with my mental health. Me being a victim of narcissistic abuse does not determine my life. And it means enough to stand on this stage to be able to change some people's lives in this very moment. More so, to be able to continue to change mine and others as I go through this process. That is the end of the problem that I was actually experiencing. Now we're on to moving from my problem into my pain. You see, when I was attending college at Los Angeles Harbor College, at the age of 19, I had to realize that I was being way too hard on myself. My teacher would tell me, stop being so hard on yourself. And I was actually taking it as my life's purpose and my life's duty to step into the footsteps of my uncle's shoes and become him, in continuing his business as a drywall practitioner, because he owned his own drywall business. So it became important to me, as this would be the highest chance of success I could possibly achieve, that I would become the owner of his drywall business by learning everything that he actually knew. So by being able to gain the experience in practicing in his business and learning from him and the people that were operating with him, I was able to take that knowledge and apply it into my own life. But what I realized was that through this application of that experience, it wasn't actually something that I really, really wanted to do. So I had to turn an eye and say, let's try a different experience. And I feel like for me, changing my personality and my identity, my inner voice, to try something new and simply just try and gain a different experience was one of the biggest things for me to completely change my mentality, because it was that first step that I decided and committed to that allowed me to continuously take different steps in my life that were the opposite of what I believed to be true, and a renewed growth of what was my own unique truth, not somebody else's. So through being able to go through school and realizing that business management was not actually for me, that going to school and learning these things about taking classes and learning things that didn't actually benefit me, things that I couldn't apply into my actual daily life, I was then able to realize that school, going through this process every single day and doing things that weren't there to benefit me, were actually not serving me, and they were degrading me and my personality. I had to stop everything I was doing and realize that it's not going well. I'm screwing up all of my classes. Everything that I'm learning, I'm hurting with. My grades are plummeting. The people I'm connecting with, I don't have any time for even being able to hang out after school. And when I do have time, I play a video game that I'm trying to build a community and be a leader of. So everything's really not working out so great for me in college. I might as well stop making myself unhealthy and quit. So what I ended up doing was quitting my English class. And my English class, I was doing terrible at. By dropping this class, I felt so much better the first day that I continuously believed that it was better for me to just terminate everything. So I came in 2 days later having continuously repeated this cycle of belief that I just gotta let go and quit everything. So much so that I dropped my other 3 classes 2 days later when I came into school. And I went into my counselor, and she had no problem with it. Nobody with the entire staff had any real problem with it. It was actually quite shocking that there wasn't more support in trying to change my beliefs, but obviously I was convinced and I wasn't gonna change my mind, so they were okay with it. So I quit all of my classes, and it made me feel so much better. In fact, I didn't even tell my parents what was going on until several days later, when maybe my mother realized that, my lifestyle was changing and I was doing something. She didn't even realize that. I just told her I quit school. It was funny how inapparent it was that my entire life was going through a different habit of routine, and I was staying home, and she had no idea. I didn't even tell my father until several weeks later, maybe even a month, when I tried to move in with him. It's just the relationship that my mother and my father had, they didn't really communicate because they had previously been divorced a long time before and after. They just weren't talking. So within a 2-week period after dropping all of these classes, I actually decided to quit my job too. So I put in my 2 weeks notice and I quit my job. Not very long after, I actually ended up moving places. Within a month after quitting my job, I decided that I had to go live with my father. Instead of living with my mother, it was a much more positive decision for me to make, to be mentally healthy, to completely change my environment, to no longer have to put up set boundaries in our relationship and just say, this is it. I can't deal with this anymore. I like to move and completely change everything I was doing. So this was a vital step for me to be able to change my entire life. This must be kind of funny because it seems to me like there's a whole family of flies just swarming around my head. Maybe I just smell that damn delicious. I'm not entirely sure. But where I'm actually walking is a place called Runyon Canyon. And it's like going up to Hollywood, the Hollywood Hills, and seeing the sign and everything. It's on the other side, but not exactly here. So I'm just going to continue talking and speaking into my book, not caring about what other people think, right? So when I actually moved out of my mother's place and started to live with my father, what happened during the first week was such a massive transformation in my mental state of thinking, because my body began to realize that it had safety, because my mind was no longer being attacked and it wasn't being infiltrated by negative beliefs. I was then able to let go of my senses that I was holding on to in order to have a great effort of energy to protect me. So I was able to be vulnerable and spend some alone time that was so heavily critical for me to be able to just sit down in my room, displace with more positive thoughts, and have a better relationship with myself. So when I began to do this, I was then able to go through a whole release of negativity. Just look at that. Oof. What's the city there? It's pretty cool, huh? Through completely displacing this negativity with relaxation in the belief that I could be able to heal, this next following week was so groundbreaking for me that 1 week after removing myself from a negative, toxic, abusive environment, my bodily insides literally let go. And what erupted from my gut was the most terrifying infestation that literally had me have a sickness that lasted for an entire week, where this bacteria that was growing inside my gut erupted out of my asshole day in, day out. And it was bloody and disgusting. And I was so relieved after all this that my brain fog that I was having in all of my mental ways of thinking was dissipating. And I was starting to think a lot clearer after being able to have a bit more control in my mental state. So this was a huge, massive transition for me, in a way that I get to start thinking from my own beliefs and my own identity, that this was one of the first few steps by having this safety, not feeling threatened and not asking survival-based questions, so that I was actually able to heal and recover at a rapid rate moving forward from here. Healing to me meant truly expressing myself so that I could be understood. Now, the doctors from this experience wouldn't actually tell me the truth. I knew what was happening with me. So it created a huge controversial thought process for me that I had to accept, believing that the doctors were somewhat against me and that they didn't know what they were talking about. So during this time period, after moving out, I worked in multiple jobs in multiple businesses. One of them being Lexus. As a car salesman, I worked there for a few weeks, maybe 4, before I was fired for wanting to go to a concert that they wouldn't let me go to, which was my friend's. During this time period, what they actually did was limit my freedom of expression, my ability to sell these cars, so that I wasn't able to work on my own and actually be of service to the customers. They literally didn't want me to sell. And it was basically set up so that I was going to get fired. And I'm the one who fulfilled their wish. So I lost my job and put myself in a position where I wanted to try something else. At the time, I was exploring something called Revolution Financial Management. And this was a network marketing company that I wanted to take part in. But what actually ended up happening was I met someone who was a very, how I would call at the time, high caliber person. He was somebody who knew what he was talking about. 23 years old, his name was Kyron Ford. And in being able to develop a relationship with him by being introduced to the person who worked in this company, or by the person who worked in this company, my entire life began to take a complete different turn. Now, I didn't actually work with them. What I actually did was paid them $100 to get set up, and then I asked for a refund with my credit card company and didn't end up working with them. And I told Kyron to quit the thing and not be a part of it. So it was an interesting establishment where our relationship dynamic changed, and we both went into a company called Kyani, which was basically a supplement company that helped people with their health. Through being able to work with them, everything I was doing started to take a massive turn. So I worked with them for a month during the months of August and September, maybe even October. And during August, I went to Vegas with the team Andy Cookman, and Kyron, and maybe some other people. But basically, we had this awesome trip, our first time in Vegas, and I really kind of broke my comfort zone and did some cool things. So it was quite the remarkable experience for me. And then within 1 to 2 months, I actually quit this business. It wasn't for me, and it didn't help me achieve my freedom of expression. I was literally calling everybody up and saying that I was a leader and I wanted to lead you by offering you this opportunity. And if you didn't join, you were missing out. How foolish I was to think that I was a leader who was somebody who was sharing something worth listening to at the time. After this, during the month of September 18th, 2017, I began to work in a different company called the Business Club Academy. And the Business Club Academy was basically a branding and marketing services company that helped coaches, consultants, and speakers position, package, and promote their message online so that they could be able to find more qualified clients. By being able to work with them, I worked with them for a year and a half. And I was able to learn basically how to be able to build my own business and everything necessary to be able to connect with and get people on the phone so that you can be able to then sell them whatever package, program, service that you had, to then be able to help them find more clients and grow their business online. So basically, through this experience, I went through a lot of turmoil, inner turmoil, where my connection with the people in that process wasn't quite going how I wanted it to. And at this point, going through sales and learning all these things is when I decided that I wanted to do this thing called awareness documentation. Originally, I called it personal awareness documentation because it was like personal development, and I was doing this to develop self-awareness, so I called it personal awareness documentation. And I started reliving the process that I was doing a year ago in the beginning of 2017, doing it then in February of 2018, literally picking up a camera, filming myself speaking into it, and then playing it back so that I understood what was actually happening in my life by exploring my awareness with a guided meditation practice. So by doing this, I was able to self-reflect on all the experiences that I was having and learn from them at a rapid rate moving forward. What I realized that through my sales, I was doing okay, but really only enough to be able to sustain myself. I wasn't living a great lifestyle, apart from all the money I spent buying coffee and hanging out at cafes on my credit cards. Basically, I had to reach a point where I maxed out on my credit cards about, $3,000 or something like that. And I couldn't pay anymore. And I realized that the relationships I was having in the Business Club Academy were not very supportive in being able to help me grow. So I was kind of all on my own, helping the people that I wanted to, and not having the support system that I needed to be able to advance and move forward was quite upsetting to me, because what they would actually do they would poke me and say what I was doing wasn't good because I was learning all these different things and not purely focusing on the business, even when they didn't help me get through the toughest times in the business, helping me learn everything that I needed to know personally. Of course, we can get on group calls and stuff, but that was a lot different from being able to have a personal guided experience where somebody is actually caring to be able to help you, right? So this controversy that I was experiencing was the development of me flipping a negative script and turning into a positive throughout this whole learning process. And I documented basically every part of it, of me speaking into a camera, self-reflecting on my experiences I would have every day. I was breaking old habits and developing the emotional literacy, being able to challenge myself to do different things, and things that are actually good for me, less of the bad. It was literally a simple practice of doing things that made me feel better and less of what made me not feel better. So, in effect, throughout this whole process, I was doing so many incredible and crazy things, like doing a daily quote where every day I would come up with my own personal quote, post it on the stories, and share it on Instagram. Daily question, I would ask you a specific question about what you're thinking in relation to either what I was doing or a question that I could be able to answer through the perception of your mental growth or sales or marketing, anything like that. Daily gratitude, where I wake up every day and share my gratitude basically at the start of my day, and basically inspire you to start your day too. And another one was Bible reading. So I would share a specific verse from the Bible, the part of the Bible that I was reading, for you to be able to appreciate. And I put a lot of these on my highlight reels on my Instagram page. During the month of May, I started a YouTube channel. And before all that, I was doing what I called interview reviews, where I basically took the time to be able to interview the people that I would then have another follow-up call for sales, and I would inspect their morals and their values, and basically what character made them to be the person that they were actually being. And by doing this, I was literally building my identity and my integrity. So this was part of the reason why people didn't like and appreciate me for all the things that I was doing, because I was interviewing people that I was supposed to be selling to. In effect, I was developing an authentic relationship that was more meaningful, so that I could then be able to have a better relationship where I could close a sale, which was different from what everybody else was doing. So there had to be good reasoning as for why they didn't like it, but it was just me becoming a higher, truer expression of myself, a better version of me that they may not have quite understood. So it was this interview review process that allowed me to create emotional reflection, where I was able to better understand myself in connection to everybody else, and have a healthy conversation in support of them instead of just myself and my own opinion. There was a point where I started a YouTube channel and started to go all out, literally making these awareness documentations, playing them back, watching my film, understanding myself, posting them online. And that was during the period of May and June. I would basically post every day. And this is the part where I started to feel betrayed by the people who were in the Business Club Academy, because they were not I just almost swallowed a fly, or inhaled them. They were not being supportive, and they were not supporting all of the actions I was doing, which was actually helping the team. They were going against me instead. At this period, after that, what actually ended up happening was I lost my car on June 10th. So my mother or my brother ended up taking the keys from my car and hiding them where I could not find them, which resulted and me not having the financial capability to pay for a new set of keys made from my lock. It was a 2000 Honda Civic EX, and because of this, I ended up having to scrap the car and pull it off the street because it was racking up tickets. It was the only decision that I could make that would save me from more financial degradation and move me in a positive state where I was no longer contemplating their control over me. I searched the whole house and I didn't find my keys, and I realized that I had to claim my dignity by getting my car towed and relieving myself of the stress of them basically dangling the keys over my head. So I didn't have a method of transportation. I didn't have a way to continue doing the business, so I was basically on my own completely. There was no support system for me. Fast forward another month, and I was going on vacation with my family. But before I went on vacation with my family to a place called Idaho, in the mountains of Idaho, the woods, my brother actually sent me a picture of my keys saying, "Are these yours?" Of course they were mine. So this was a huge corruption in our relationship where, he was trying to bring it together before we went to the family and settle some things, which obviously made sense that he did it or they did it on purpose, which was upsetting. And continuing from there, I went on vacation, and coming back from vacation, I felt refreshed, but to try and get back into the work that I was doing started to feel really draining. Like I wasn't going anywhere, I was just doing the same thing over and over again, thinking my goals were going to get bigger. And eventually I hit this draining wall where I couldn't really do anymore, Like I started to really slow down. I started to push myself to the point where I was going to burn out, And it wasn't good for me anymore. So I had to, if I were to be continuing in my lifestyle the way that I wanted, because it was actually degrading, and everything that I was doing was becoming very, very difficult. So I had to realize and accept that I had a surgery in my past life, not in my past life, but in my current life, 7 years ago, and that surgery was on my testicle. Because of that, it was stopping me and limiting me from everything that I was doing, because my nerve or whatever was happening inside of me was stopping me from being able to move how I needed to in order to be able to create a productive effort where I could be able to do parkour, and all these great things that I used to do were no longer possible. Simply biking and walking, all these things were so troublesome for me that I couldn't be able to just simply experience my life anymore, and it was slowing me down to the point where even sitting was becoming a challenge. Laying down, sleeping, everything that would be a natural event in somebody's daily life was becoming a massive complication that was stopping me from being able to do my work. So I couldn't focus and think as clearly, and I would have to spend a bunch of extra time, sleeping and resting, trying to recover from all the damage that was actually happening to my body. So I opened up about this experience online and shared it with the people that I was working with and people I was connected to, and started a GoFundMe campaign in acknowledgement of this. When I did this, I actually asked myself the question, if I found out today I only had 6 months to live, what would I want to do with my life? The answer that I first came up with was speaking, because naturally speaking was the thing that I could do, but my body limited me from doing anything else. So speaking was the logical decision. But I had to ask myself this question a second time, and the answer was dance. So I wanted to pursue dance, and I didn't know what would happen with it, but I decided that dancing was something I wanted to do. So by opening up this GoFundMe, I was raising something that would help me with my health, paying for a surgery that would resolve this complication. But I was also having the deep devoted interest that over the next 6 months I'm going to do everything I can to dance and have fun. And that's exactly what I did. Wow. What is it? Look at that. Isn't that incredible? Wow. I think that people run up and down these things. Wow. That is so amazing. Look at that. Wow. So cool. Get these flies out the picture, huh? So cool. Now that we're at the peak, we can get all views here. Whew. Hollywood. Cool. These flies are my friends. Ooh. Well, long story short, the GoFundMe failed. I was not able to make hardly any money. In fact, it was probably the lowest accounted for GoFundMe that I've actually produced. Even after making a 3-hour documentary about my personal life, I wasn't able to get the contributions necessary to be able to get people to understand my story so that they would then pay me money to be able to help me with my health challenges. So it was an extreme peril for me, and I had to try something to do something different to be authentically me. So because I made that split difference between, what would I want to do with my life if I found out today I only had 6 months to live, I decided that I wanted to dance. So my effort was now in pursuing dance lessons, dance classes, so that I could be able to be the dancer that I wanted to be with the 6 months time I had left. And, it was really incredible the first night that I came back after my first dance class. Beforehand, I was dancing in Costco and dancing anywhere I could in front of coffee shops and stuff. But to go into a dance class and be able to pick up everything and have fun, be good, it was so fun. So fun. I completely enjoyed the experience, and I learned that I was actually talented at dance. However hard it was for me to force my body into a position where I could dance, I was actually very talented at it. So I continued to pursue this, and for me, it was really an experience where I wanted to consistently grow and mature in as a dancer. So by continuously taking dance classes, I learned that not only was I a dancer, but I was also an entertainer, a performer, and what I called an artist, because I had a certain musical inclination to dance and combine everything that I was doing with the music and kind of project and express myself in a different way. I started dancing and somehow creating musical inclination to make lyrics that would be in combination with this. So all of my movements, everything I was doing in combination with that, I was kind of coming up with my own verbiage that would express myself. And in connection to what I was listening to, it was really interesting because the different tone of the music that I was listening to, not only would I dance and project myself in a unique and different way, but I would also try something different with the lyrics that I would reshape that song to be. So it was really, really fascinating. I gave myself a few titles that I followed through with, and learned that I had 4 unique talents: not only a dancer, an entertainer, a performer, but also an artist. During this time, I was actually looking outside of the work that I was doing at the Business Club Academy, in which case I started to pursue something that was more of this entertaining inclination. So I wanted to be a server. That way I could be able to touch people, entertain them throughout the conversation, and make money doing it, get tips and everything. So I started working at a place called Italia, and I only stayed there for less than a week in the month of December. Realistically speaking, I was fired quite straight off the bat. Within my training, they didn't even want to complete my training. And because that was not okay with me, I'm like, nah, I'm not interested. So they wanted me to sign the papers. I refused, and basically got fired. So I got so good at dancing within these few months, from November 1st or October all the way up through to December and January. January 21st, what actually ended up happening was I got put into a position where on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I was no longer welcomed at the dance studio that I was attending called Boogie Zone Utopia. And they didn't want me there simply on the pretense that what I believe was I was getting so good that I was doing better than most people and I was outperforming them. Also, because this affected their ego, I also wasn't attending the classes that would help the owner make more money. And because I had an unlimited membership and their membership structure was not set up to be acceptant of all the classes that I was attending, I may have been taking too much money out of their pockets because I was dancing so much during the time period that I was actually there. I didn't exactly have a routine schedule like everybody else. I would sleep for like 12 hours or more to be able to recover after a dance session, and I would come in the following day closer to night and take 2 or 3 sessions and just dance my heart away. So this may have been costing them money, but not only that, I was a really good dancer. Not only that, they came up with the stupid complaint that I was filming all my dance lessons. So therefore, it was another reason that I couldn't be able to participate with them in something like that. So they refunded my money and kicked me out on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It was quite shocking and disappointing at the same time. So this kind of really blowed me because, the dance room in my apartment complex, I ended up discovering they had a yoga room and I used it for dance. But what ended up happening was within the first couple weeks, a security guard happened to find me there really late at night. I think it was close to 12, close to midnight. And, well, because I was dancing so late there, she must have notified everybody else in the house. And the clubhouse actually ended up locking off that dance room, and I wasn't able to really use it anymore. So this stopped me from all of the dance progress that I was pursuing, and the only way I could be able to do it was to ask them for a key, and I wasn't really there at the hours that they wanted me to be there, because what I ended up doing was stopping my sales and stopping being in the Business Club Academy because it wasn't for me anymore. I was pursuing something that was completely different for my energetic expression, and becoming who I was as a dancer, an entertainer, a performer, an artist. I started working at a taco place, and this place was called Long Beach Taco in Long Beach, obviously. And I made so much money there during the time that I spent. I probably broke sales records there because it was a brand new place that opened up and they were hiring, and I happened to get in literally when I was interviewed with the manager there. I shook his hand and looked him in the eyes at the end of the interview and said, "If you don't hire me," smiled, "you'll regret it." And he laughed and he hired me. So within a couple weeks is when I actually stopped working there. I basically fired myself because after 1 week of being with them, they refused to give me a schedule for an entire week. And I said, I'm not going to handle this. I'm not going to take it anymore. I prefer not to work with you any longer. So I fired myself, came in, and then they decided not to compensate me appropriately. And that was pulling some real straws, man. So I chose to, from that point, take my life to a completely different level, with the realization that people were taking things away from me and I didn't want that anymore. And the realization that I had become a higher, truer expression of myself. I had to make ends meet work with the talents and the abilities that I had. And I developed a lot of experience in being able to develop my own emotional stability, mental stability, that I believed I could be an emotional freedom coach. So what I did from that point on, after getting fired, was I started my own emotional freedom coaching business. And by doing this, I was actually really interested and inclined to go and speak for speaking engagements, and be hired at schools and foster centers and places where there were the youth that I could be able to speak at. What I found from this was that by going and trying to be able to speak at these places, they didn't want me to share my message in particular, and I wasn't so open to that. In fact, I actually denied them having me because they wanted me to talk about specific topics. And if it wasn't me expressing myself truly, then I didn't feel like I should go in there and be a part of the conversation. So I denied the speaking gigs that I provided for myself, and I chose not to be a part of them. Simple as that. In addition to this, it must have been within a 1 week or a 10-day time span that I was actually able to manage to get myself into having my first client for my coaching business. And it was really, really cool for me at the time because, it's like I officially am a professional. I make money doing what I do. That was awesome. And from there on, I was able to have 1 to 2 clients that I was working with consistently, but they weren't paying me very much. So it was a bit of a struggle to try and have this business be manageable because there was only so much money I was making. There were only so many clients that I had. So with me trying to pursue these things, I forgot to mention, during the week that I was waiting for my last hours, being able to work at Long Beach Taco Company, my schedule wasn't coming in, so I actually spent that time and I was practicing things I couldn't work on. I actually discovered that I was a singer by practicing singing in front of a camera, and I was shocked. There was only so much that I could be able to do because my diaphragm was effectively locked up, so I couldn't really truly express myself in the best and highest ways. There was only a specific note that I could be able to hit, and from that I was just so happy, but those talents were locked away, so it was a bit of a hidden gift. So one really critical part that I forgot to mention is that when I got myself fired by firing myself and quitting Long Beach Taco Company, I literally set a goal for myself that was hugely imperative for my physical health, that at the end of 86 days, I would find a solution for my problem with my body that had been causing me so much strain on my back, my muscles, and everything that was tensioned in my entire left side of my body, that I would in turn be able to move forward with a direction that would heal me. Now, through this 86 days, I took each day very intensively in the way that I started my own business, and being able to carry that forward. As I mentioned, I had only a couple clients, and I tried to do these speaking gigs. but there was only so much that I could do. So because my health was really pressing, I made a very adept system that was geared around my coaching process. And I even worked on this process, through my birthday. There wasn't much of a celebration, becoming 21 years old, at the point where, I was solely focused on my work and developing this system so that I could get myself out of this situation. And there wasn't really a solution with everything that I was working with. And I knew that I needed money to be able to solve my problems. So personally, I had to realize that at the age of 21, my father actually told me, I'm going to move. You can't come with me. And I didn't believe him at the time. What actually happened was that I proceeded with my plans, and I launched my second GoFundMe, which was on April 19th, and trying to use this to stabilize myself and raise the funds for my surgery, it actually failed. So I was really, really disappointed with the people that I was reaching out to, with myself. My family was even badgering me and not really doing anything to help me, because I was asking random people or people that I knew for help to give me money, acting as if they weren't helping me. And they weren't helping me. They were, in fact, acting like they were helping me when they weren't. They were talking up, ask us, we'll help you and stuff. But nothing was really happening toward my benefit. They were just talking about it and making a scene as if they were helping me, in which case they were asking me for conditions to be met that could not be met. So it was actually completely false, in their deception and illusion, the tricks that they were using for other people to see it publicly, how they might be helping me when they weren't. So I ended up making an entire movie about my personal growth journey that shared all my vulnerabilities, my pains, my weaknesses, my deepest insecurities. And this was basically putting together the composition of all of my ad talks, the awareness documentations that I made. And it took me the entire month of May to put this together, and then several days more to be able to edit it and refine it and add new pieces that made it whole and complete, that made it completely powerful, in accordance with strengthening the story, adding more special effects that would make it something worthwhile for watching, and not just a ton of interesting things that would have seams. I wanted it to be seamless. I wanted it to be as close to perfection as possible, and I watched it multiple times to make sure that I got every single detail correct. There's a couple things that I noticed later that were messed up, but that's okay. And with this movie, and having had it all put together, I actually launched the third GoFundMe. And the third GoFundMe was based off the backing of this personal growth journey, the movie, and I was trying to use it to raise funds so that I could be able to save my life effectively and show the world who I actually was, so that, my story was credible and everything that I was doing was real. And in sharing this, I was hoping that people would support me and help me move forward along my journey. But it seemed to me like everything I was doing, it was kind of somewhat inevitable that I would go through this pain and this struggle, and I would be all alone and nobody would be there to help me. So I once again had to learn that I have to take care of myself, that nobody is there to help me. And by being the main character of I Own Life, I had to take everything into my own hands and try and do this all again. Displace my belief system with people may not be the greatest. They may not have the best intentions. They may not be there to help you. And it was something that I had to learn as a negative response to the results of what was going on around me. I mean, I wasn't getting the results that I was looking for. After 3 times, I felt betrayed by the world, like even my family was attacking me for it. and they completely invalidated my campaign by putting comments that made me look like a bad person to post this movie, and they prevented me from actually getting healthy by receiving help from anybody else who may help me when they didn't actually help me themselves. If they would have helped me, I would have had money, I would have had my surgery, I would have been okay. But no, that's not the situation. So by taking this complete responsibility into my own hands, I started to develop a process, a system actually, called 30 Steps to Live a Purpose-Driven Life. And this system was really geared toward around developing a video series that would unlock a specific truth for people to be able to then take and apply into their life, so that they could be able to not have to go through the pain that they would otherwise experience if they hadn't experienced and lived this truth themselves. They would effectively initiate and continue a cycle that would help serve them and help them accelerate their lifestyle by multiplying the effect and the active outcome and result that they would be getting. With this, I also added, in addition to, the complete, absolute interest in taking my ad talk process and transforming it into what I called the ad walk. Because in particular, with this specific time period, I was completely geared toward walking in my calling. And because I was walking in my calling, I figured that I wasn't just talking about what I wanted to do anymore. I was actually doing it. I was being who and everything I actually was. So that was a huge step for me. And with this ad walk process, right before that, at the end of 86 to fix, hashtag 86 to fix, what I ended up discovering was on the final day that I had set out to find a result and a resolving problem for my health and my challenges thereof, I actually visited a doctor who told me the ways that he could help me, and I had to make a decision that he wasn't there to help me, that the whole system, the American medical system, was rigged, and that there was no way that I was going to get help with what I was looking for. In fact, they were trying to prolong my dis-ease, prolong my pain and discomfort, and keep me sick so that I couldn't get better. So I realized that it wasn't me that was the problem, it was the system. So I had to take everything that I knew and change my direction, change the years that I had been spending trying to get help from something that had consumed my financial resources, my time, my energy, my health, everything that I had, to be able to get a result that absolutely crippled me and put me in a great place of hardship and vulnerability that was going to be very hard to get out of. So in this position that I was in, I started to try and develop a system using the ad walks, the 30 steps to live a purpose-driven life, and all of the components of my coaching process and what that would look like on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. On June 19th, because my father had told me that I would not be welcome to live with him anymore, it was on June 19th that I actually discovered and met somebody, and somebody else that was with them, that I would be able to live with them. And that I would be safe and secure, I'd have a house to stay in, everything would be okay, I wouldn't be homeless like I expected. That is really relieving to have stayed with them for a couple nights, but I didn't know the absolute terror and horror that was to come from opening myself up to an experience that I thought was good for me, but actually was one of the most challenging realizations that I had to uncover for me.